Welcome back to Inside City Hall, where we are turning back to tonight's top story. As we told you earlier, the mayor unveiled his executive budget plan and credited Governor Hochul for working with the city to help close the city's budget deficit. My next guest, the city controller, Mark Levine, commended the mayor for the plan, but noted that it relies heavily on one-time measures and short-term pension savings without tackling the root issue of city government continuing to spend more than it takes in. City Controller Mark Levine joins me now to talk about that and much more. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Thank you, Errol. Great to be here.
Let's start right there. It relies heavily on one-time measures and short-term pension savings without solving for the fact that city government continues to spend more than we take in. Do you have a recommendation about how the city can better balance spending and revenue?
Well, Errol, I do want to start with some good news, which is the mayor deserves a lot of credit for improving on the February plan. No property tax, which is, as we've talked about, very unequal. Instead, a much more targeted pied-à-terre tax. And we've avoided drawing down our reserve funds. That's really to be commended, and I thank the governor and the state legislature for putting significant resources in to make that possible, and I commend the mayor for fighting for that from Albany. But that didn't cover the entire gap, and there were some measures that we're exercising this year that won't be available to us next year. We call that a one-time.
What are the one-shots? None of them came out. I was watching the presentation, and that didn't jump out at me, but what do you see?
Sure. We're drawing down from our labor reserve, and I think there's potentially a justification for that. This is a fairly obscure fund, but it's something you can do once, and then you can't do again next year. Some of the money we got from Albany was not recurring, so that'll be a one-shot benefit. And there's a few even more obscure accounts that we're hitting that total about $2.8 billion of non-recurring resources. That just pushes a risk into next year. What could we do? I think it's important that we actually try and improve on reserves ahead of the uncertainty next year. And that's going to mean reining in some of the fast-growing expenses that you and I have spoken about on past shows.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to some of that. As a broad proposition, isn't it true that a growing city will always be spending faster than it takes money in? I mean, I think just in the broadest terms, when you're talking about, say, the youth of the city, we invest in them. We spend money up front, right? And sooner or later, they get older. First of all, we head off a lot of problems by getting them a good, sound education. And then secondly, they grow up, they get jobs, and they start paying into the system.
Well, you do want to invest in young people and our seniors and cultural institutions. You want to make this a city that thrives, and that does require robust investments. The city is growing right now. Actually, tax revenue is growing. We had a record bonus season on Wall Street. Despite that, expenses are growing even faster. And no, that is not necessarily the case. It hasn't been the case throughout New York City history. It is the case now, and it's leading to this imbalance that we're all trying to work on. We've got to fix that structural imbalance for the long term, because we don't know what's coming next year and beyond. We have all these concerns about the potential of a recession. With all the disruption from the Trump administration, we have disruption from AI. This should be a time to build our fiscal cushion so we're ready for what comes next.
One of the biggest savings measures the mayor talks about in his plan involves stretching out payments into the city's pension funds, which of course is your domain. What do you make of the mayor's proposal?
Look, I think there's a logic to smoothing out pension payments. And not to get too technical, but we were going to sort of hit a very big cliff on that in 2032. The question is, what do we do with that windfall? Really, it's a once-in-a-lifetime windfall, and I would prefer to see that go into bolstering reserves, because that won't come around again, instead of using it just to close this year's gap.
You previously pointed to City FEPS, the main voucher program, as one of the more expensive programs, that it's growing at too quick of a rate. The mayor talked about putting the brakes on it, but he didn't talk about sort of freezing it or cutting off access to it or even creating a waiting list. So as far as you can tell, have we sort of cured this 4% per month growth in the program?
Well, this is a very important program. I'm very proud that New York City is the only city that has a local version of Section 8, and it's supporting 70,000 families right now, and it's helped to keep people out of homelessness. It's growing now, Errol, at an unsustainable rate, 3 to 4% a month. It's doubling every year and a half or so. Next year, it's projected to cost more than the entire budget of HPD. So it's not sustainable. Now, the mayor's working on slowing that growth through some fairly technical approaches, not by changing who's eligible. But I'm not sure if that'll be enough, honestly. And I'm not sure if we can continue without some constraints on the pace of growth. Look, for Section 8, they have a an allotment every year, and then when we hit it, there's a waiting list. It's not ideal, but it makes for a manageable budget, and we don't have that in New York. And we can't print our own money like the federal government.
Right.
We can't run a budget deficit. So I do think it would be more prudent just to have parameters on how fast it can grow. We don't quite have that yet.
There's litigation out there about whether the program can be stopped or frozen. Is the mayor playing for time? I mean, maybe that will answer the question.
The litigation is about a significant expansion on top of the current program. And so when we're talking about a 3 to 4% growth rate today, that could double if that expansion goes forward. And that's not accounted for in the budget.
Right.
So I know that's still being negotiated, but that would be an additional expense that's not yet in there.
You and I have talked before about special education litigation. The mayor talked about this today in his presentation, the so-called Carter cases. What do you make of his proposal? He's basically talking about making it so that there be fewer opportunities or maybe valid reasons to resort to litigation and getting the expensive payouts into private schools.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do, which is exactly what the mayor proposed, is expand services in the public schools for kids with learning challenges so that they don't need to go to a private school, which we are funding. He's put that in the budget. We're going to be watching closely to see what kind of savings it yields, but I do think that is exactly the right first step.
Separate from the mayor's budget, we were already planning to sit down tonight. Your timing is impeccable, so we can talk about the budget, but you actually have released a report on master agreements that city agencies sign in order to avoid a lot of problems and delays in procurement in goods and services by just signing a master agreement and then you just kind of re-up and buy more of the same thing. Right. Explain how that practice has been costing the city billions of dollars.
Well, you might think that we just negotiate every single contract discreetly and go through procurement and bid it out and get the best offer we can. But sometimes when you have a good or service that you might need at an unexpected pace over a long term, you just negotiate a single master agreement that allows you to draw down on it. And you sometimes end up paying more than you expected or even paying less than you expected. It tends to be a less exact way of budgeting. So we suggested a variety of ways to tighten that up.
And the main thing you talked about, as I could tell in the report, is transparency, so that somebody knows what's going on with one of these master agreements, right?
Yes, transparency for the vendors and for us as city government. And so the agencies have stricter guidelines upon which to operate, especially when these are long-term agreements.
Okay. Getting back to the budget process for just a sec, what's the process as far as you're concerned? Are your folks going through this thing with a fine-tooth comb at this point? Did you see any surprises here? Are you going to be testifying and maybe issuing a more comprehensive analysis? Oh,
yes. We're digging in very deep. We're going to do our own analysis on the costs and the revenue projections. We'll be releasing that to coincide with my testimony in early June that City Council will be holding on the mayor's executive budget. We're also going to run this data through the parameters that the credit agencies have supplied us to evaluate whether we think this might impact our credit rating. So we're going to be doing a very deep dive just as we did on the February budget, and I'll be happy to come on here and talk about that in the weeks ahead.
Absolutely. On social media today, you pointed out that inflation is up significantly in the city, outpacing national inflation significantly in some cases. Grocery prices are being hit the hardest. Why is that happening, and is there anything government can do about that?
I'd say three big reasons. Energy, but specifically electricity, which is, we don't have really good local data on this, but it's up more than 12% in the Northeast. Over a single year. That's an extraordinary pace of growth. Groceries, believe it or not, are up almost 6% year on year. This is food you buy away from home. That's an abnormally fast growth in those prices. And lastly, rent. Rent is also growing here. We know this is a problem. We've talked about this 100 times. So actually, New York City, it's the New York City metro area. Our pace of inflation is actually even faster than that for the nation as a whole. It's something all of us have to work much more on.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Comptroller Levine, thanks so much for coming by. Great talking with you.
You got it.